Welcome to the G5 Hive on our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Texas State Bobcats, who finished 8-5 last season. They capped off their year with a win in the First Responder Bowl over the Rice Owls. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 13th. We have some special guests joining us today. They are a Texas State sports podcast. He is Jakob Rodriguez. He is Andrew Zimmel. Together they make up Squarin Around. Jakob can be found at Jakob Ryrod on X. Andrew can be found at Andrew_Zimmel on X. The duo can be found at Squarin Pod on X. Welcome to the show, guys.
I feel like I could run through a brick wall right now. I'm so excited with that intro.
You guys hyped me all the way up. I'm awake.
Oh, man.
I'm ready to go. I can't believe you guys mispronounced Zimmel's name. It's going to be fire this episode.
All right. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and what led you into starting Squaring Around.
Well, what's up, man? Thanks for having us. Me and Zimmel are now, if you can believe it or not, based on how we just acted, both professional journalists in San Antonio. We're both Bobcats. We graduated in class of 2020, so during COVID. We covered all the teams pretty much. I had some special emphasis on some teams. Zimmel literally covered every single team because either people couldn't stand him or because he just wanted that much experience. But yeah, we got our hands full at Texas State covering every single team. And then when we graduated, we kind of took a palate cleanser for like 2 years. And then I hit up Zimmel one day when we hired GJ Kinney. And I was like, hey, we should kind of ride this wave and see what happens. Because we're having these 3-hour-long conversations post-game anyway. What's up?
Yeah, no, and he hit me up and I was like, let's get a podcast going. The only stipulation was I just show up and talk. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. So that's what I do. I just show up and talk now.
That's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. They lost TJ Finley, but they bring in the Sun Belt Player of the Year in Jordan McLeod. How did Jordan McLeod look in the spring?
He looked really good. I'll tell you that right now, Justice. It's a spring practice, right? So you're not going to get to see their best of the best type of stuff, but he struggled early. You could tell that he kind of got more in a groove, and I thought that he looked pretty good by the end of it.
Yeah, there's a big debate between me and Zimmel, too, whether or not he's 6 feet tall or not. Jury's still out, I think.
Listed at 6 foot. I said until I see him in the deep end of the pool, I don't believe it. I'm saying that's 5'11".
Yeah, I would agree with both you guys. That he's not 6 foot. Was he there? His commitment was like a little bit late, but was he there for all of spring practice, or did he kind of come in like the middle? Or
he was there for the last 8 or 9 weeks. It was like a special academic. Apparently, our compliance people are the best in the business, and so they knew every single rule to get him over pretty quick. Is the story that GJ Kinney tells. So that was kind of sick. Yeah,
behind the scenes,
doing some sort of master's program in that way.
Behind the scenes, it sounds like he was shopping himself around to some bigger programs. Nobody was biting. Texas State had a really bad slip through the cracks, we'll call it, with a quarterback situation. And it just ended up being a perfect situation with Finley leaving and McLeod coming in.
All right. So this is a guy that I'm personally super excited for. I was actually a little disappointed when McLeod came because I wanted to see PJ Hatter. But how has his development been coming along, and what do you think the future holds for him?
Yeah, that dude's awesome. Yeah, me and Zimmel think the world of PJ Hatter. He had a touchdown that was like called back last year too. I think it was during the Jackson State game. It might have been Nevada though. But he had like a running touchdown, and I was like, "Hey, look at this! Look what we can do!" And he fits like what GJ Kinney wants to do with the ball in his hand too. So that's why we think the world of him too. He's also like one of the best players to come out of Houston too, if I remember correctly.
He's more of a GJ Kinney type of quarterback in that he kind of reminds us of the way that GJ played when he was in college. If you look at the depth charts right now online, first off, nobody knows anything. But second, like, because, the summer transfer portal is still going to come.
No, our fans know everything, Zoom.
Well, yeah, that's right. They tell us all the time how right they are. But right now, RJ Martinez is listed as QB number 2. I would kind of be surprised to see PJ Hatter not being in that QB2 position come week 1. But again, Jacob and I were joking about this off air. We were talking about how we didn't think that TJ Finley would be QB1 going into the Baylor game. And then, hey, turns out he was our guy the entire season.
Literally all the way up until the first snap. We were like, there's no way this guy gets the start.
The only thing
and in hindsight, that was the dumbest thing
McLeod's going to be QB1. That's really the only thing that you can like pretty much write in with a pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect Hatter would be QB. I mean, Martinez is like just got there, right? You know,
Yeah, he just got there.
It's one of those just got there, but it's like by the time week 1 rolls around, he'll have had the playbook. He will have been in communication with a lot of the players on the team. And the crazy thing about the Leftwich, GJ Kenny kind of offensive system, it's not that complex. It's not like they're running, Latin and everybody else is speaking pig Latin. It kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. The passing schemes. So I don't think it's the hardest thing to pick up. Again, I just think PJ Hatter's been in the building. I would be surprised if he's not QB2.
Also, if we're talking about time in the room specifically, Brad Jackson's been there for the entire spring semester. Like he was there the entire time because he was like a grayish or whatever you call that specific like transfer.
Early enrollee.
Yeah, he early enrolled at Texas State and then like even went to prom and then came back and then so he's been living like a double life basically up until the summer.
Well, moving on to the running game. Ishmael Mahdi was the last was the man last year and ran wild for 1,331 yards and 10 touchdowns. With the transfers they brought in, how did that room look in the spring?
It's going to look really good. We were joking again. I know you guys are big Ish Mahdi fans, but Lincoln Perry, he dealt with an injury last year. He was going to be running back 1 before that injury. Ishmael Mahdi was a diamond in the rough for this program. He comes back, and he's probably going to be the number 1 guy, but it's going to be running back by committee, which I am completely fine with. If you're a fantasy football player, you want 1 running back. If you're a fan of a football team, you want a committee so that everybody gets the touches equally and nobody's getting beat up when it comes to bowl season time, because I know we're going to get to it, what the expectations are for Texas State. They're very lofty this year.
Yeah, I think everybody was super excited for Lincoln last year, and then he tore his ACL like around this time last year, and it was like the worst thing like to happen. Me and Zimmel were both like, "Is this horrible?" Like this is even before they announced TJ Finley signing. So in a lot of ways, it felt like the end was already here this time last year.
So you mentioned maybe thinking about a running back by committee. What kind of split is that? Is that 50-50, 60-40? What's your thoughts?
I think it's going to be 33 across the board. I think that they use 3 running backs this year with Lincoln, with Ish, and then, they've got transfers in there, Jalen Jenkins. They've got a bunch of guys. Look, Texas State has been known to whatever rises to the top is what they're going to play with. Mm-hmm. There might be a guy that we're not even thinking about right now who come week 1, Leftwich and Kenny have looked at and said like, all right, well, what if we give this guy a touch? He has a big game against Arizona State. Then the next thing you know, we're not even, we're going to continue to talk about Ish Mahdi, but he might not be even running back 1 come front of mind in week 6. That's just how college football is now. With the transfers coming in and out, somebody might be a lot better, and we don't even know who they are yet.
Yeah, I think Jalen had a lot of touches in the spring, mostly because Ish had the stomach flu or he was sick. And so we saw him. He was not suited out or anything. Same way with a lot of guys, actually. Cole Wilson was out in the spring. Ben Bell was out in the spring. And then right after the spring was actually the first time we had heard from the team post. I don't know if we want to talk about it really, but the Jaden Dolores situation too. So that it was a kind of a weird vibe in the spring. So my mind was a little elsewhere instead of like watching exactly who was taking every single snap on the field, honestly.
Moving back to that passing game, they return 2 of their top 3 receivers in all Sun Belt second teamer Joey Hobart and Cole Wilson. But they did lose Ashton Hawkins, who transferred to Baylor. How did the receivers look in the spring? I know you mentioned Cole Wilson was out, but how did Hobart look, and did any other receivers kind of stand out for you?
This is our favorite topic on this podcast is Ashton Hawkins, so I'm glad you asked. Because Ashton was one of my boys. That's like my ride or die on last year's team. And I was just like, he just needs more time, buddy. He just needs more time. Zimmel thought the opposite up until last week, actually, when somebody brought this up, too.
So, okay, Hawkins wasn't that good last year. He had a couple of good games. He had a drop awful drops all throughout the year. And so I was like, yeah, he kind of stinks now. I don't know what to tell you. And now all of a sudden he's at Baylor and people pretend that he's a bum. I'm like, he wasn't a bum. He just had a bad case of the drops. To answer your question, Joey Hobart was the most underrated group of 5 receiver last year. Nobody knew who this guy was. Nobody cared who this guy was until he showed up in that Baylor game. And then from there on out, until then, or since then, he has been one of the guys that people really care about and people keep their eyes on. I don't think that he's going to be wide receiver 1 this year. I think it's going to be Cole Wilson. I think Hobart is in the short game more often than Wilson will be. McLeod, when he was at JMU, he wasn't the type of guy who wanted to take the top off the defense. It's going to be interesting to see how these receivers work when it talks about getting separation, especially in the middle of the field. And we didn't get to see a ton of that in the spring game. That's something I'm having an eye out for.
I brought this guy up last week. I think Drew Donnelly is going to have a breakout season. He was supposed to last year. If you look at all the highlights and all like what the team was like alluding to, he was like the fastest player on the team last year and all this stuff. Like all this like June and July sports content, basically. Drew Donnelly dominated everything. And I think he finished like with like less than 100 yards or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. The production was not there, obviously.
Factor?
This is my X factor. Yeah, Drew Donnelly. And then obviously we love Cole Wilson. We've had him on the show. He's awesome. And then Bo Sparks out of Utah Tech too. Same spot that Joey Hobart played out of. Wouldn't that be something if he was something too?
Yeah, he was a FCS All-American in 2023. Comes from Utah Tech, where you got Joey Hobart. What kind of role do you see for him in here coming in 2024? Think he's part of the rotation?
We have like 12 listed wide receivers right now. We went through all of these last week too on our show. I don't know exactly. I mean, we play like these wide splits too, so you would think we're gonna see a bunch of different wide receiver sets and things come out. We ran like a ton of stuff, and also, I mean, people thought we were gonna be like a huge tight end heavy team last year too. That didn't happen either. So I don't know. This team's kind of a wild card.
And look, you talk about the running back room. They might roll out week 1 and be like, we're not throwing the ball. We're just going to be a running team. And we have all this incredible wide receiver talent.
We are the San Francisco 49ers.
You really don't know what GJ Kenny is thinking about. I will say the only thing that I think Texas State fans don't want to see is tunnel screens or screen passes in any capacity. If we just take the screen pass out of the playbook, I think Texas State fans would be more than excited about that.
One of your transfers that I was in particular kind of excited for because I thought he looked good at times at Boston College is Jaden Williams. What can you guys tell us about him? Maybe how he looked in the spring, and can we expect him to be part of that offense? Because he's another guy I feel like has speed and can take the top off of defense.
Well, like I said, with McLeod, I don't know how much top off the defense they're going to want to do. If we went pound for pound against McLeod versus TJ Finley, I thought TJ Finley should have been the Sun Belt Player of the Year last year with the way that he played the quarterback position. I don't know how much it's going to matter when it comes to straight line speed down the field. It's going to come down to, can these guys get separation in the short game? Can these guys get separation to the sideline? If he can do that, then by all means, he might be the wide receiver 1 by, again, like week 4 or 5. But we will not know what this team really looks like. Arizona State's going to be a really good test early. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, rival UTSA. Those are kind of the 2 early season benchmarks for what this team looks like.
One of the last signees that was announced to Jalen Griffin at a UCF, 6'3", huge frame. That's like my prototypical wide receiver, especially for what we run. I think honestly he has the opportunity to be huge. We'll see what happens, I guess.
So it kind of sounds like we got Joey Hobart, Cole Wilson, and then that number 3 guy is kind of still to be determined in fall camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Well, Texas State returns tight end Connor Fox, Titus Lyons, and they also brought in Blake Smith from Oklahoma. If you were to describe the tight end usage for this offense to somebody who's never caught a game, how would you describe it?
Get ready to learn blocking. Because that's kind of what it is. They did not use the tight end as much as if you look at other iterations of the Texas State offense. And look, GJ Kenny is a far, I think, more sophisticated play caller than what Spavital was at Texas State, the previous head coach. Spavital liked the tight end, didn't love the tight end. Withers, that would be now 2 coaching cycles ago, loved the tight end. And since then, it's been pretty much a steady diet of fewer and fewer targets towards tight ends. So if you're coming to Texas State, get ready to learn how to block, because that would be the number one thing, I think, Jake.
Yeah, the last tight end that truly affected the game was Keenan Brown. And he was also the last, like, anything of ours that was like, oh, this dude could be like a Sunday afternoon type player. And when Keenan Brown was on the team, I mean, he was literally the only person that could move the ball at all. Somebody I'm really huge on is Jake Simpson. He was a true freshman last year. I think he's got everything that we need in a tight end. I was huge on Connor Fox last year too. Then he got hurt. Basically didn't play pretty much the entire year. I think he played the Rice Bowl. I don't know. It felt like we didn't have tight ends, honestly. Titus Lyons was like one of those like really cool, like feel good stories. Like a walk-on gets signed onto the team, and he's had some like really like cool moments with the team also. But really, it's like,
just none of them are in between the lines. Cool moments with the team, just none of them in between the lines.
Yeah.
So moving on to the offensive line, they graduated senior Caleb James Johnson and right guard Bray Walker, but they were able to bring back right tackle Jameto Obigbo, Dorian Stewart at left guard, and Trenton Scott at left tackle. How did they address the losses of Johnson and Walker here in the spring?
I would say it's more of a chemistry thing than anything else. When you talk about the loss of players to graduation to everything else, a lot of those offensive linemen came with GJ from Incarnate Word. So it wasn't like these 5 guys are having to learn chemistry. These 5 guys are trying to learn a blocking scheme. They pretty much were doing it at Incarnate Word, going to the playoffs and playing just a game away from the national championship a season earlier. When you lose those type of mechanism, when you lose those type of pieces, I think for most Texas State fans, it kind of goes over your head. You don't really care. I think for the people who are watching week in and week out, they know that the offensive line is going to be really big because the passing game doesn't work, the running game doesn't work. None of this offense works without an offensive line.
Yeah, and that was really the secret sauce for GJ and company last year, is just that UIW like chemistry, even like off the field stuff. Like it helped a ton that was basically the entire coaching staff poured it over. You know, you went from NCAA 14, your best team ever, and then you ported it over to NCAA 25 into the modern era, and you were able to just, you know, open up a can of whoop-ah, as Bobby Boucher would say. And then in the spring, I think we signed like 4 offensive line guys, kind of shore that up. We got some of like Deion Sanders' former Louis bag luggage. Yeah. So, you know, it's fun.
And I would want to add on that the chemistry point. Lindsey Scott Jr. was an offensive analyst last year for him.
Still actually listed.
Still listed as a coach. And it helps if your guy who was your quarterback a year prior is now on the coaching staff telling you, hey, trust the system, trust the guys around you. That helps a lot. And, you know, it helps that he's still on the roster.
Also a friend of the show. Shout out Lindsey Scott Jr.
GJ Kinney turned him into a star, and I don't, you know, that certainly shouldn't go unnoticed.
That dude's so smart. He was like an electrical engineering major or something like in engineering. It's just like the way that he was able to do that at 6 different schools while also having a bunch of success too is nuts to me.
So if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be? Do you guys have one that you can agree on, or do you each have your own?
I don't think Jacob and I could agree on anything. You could say what color is the sky, and we would argue.
Not even politics. Zimmel's way one way. You know?
I would say Lincoln Perry. I think of all the guys coming off the ACL injury, I think that he's the type of guy that has a breakout season. You know the other names. You know McLeod. You know Ishmati. You know Joey Hobart. This is a guy that when Texas State is winning the Sun Belt this year, it's going to be in large part because of him in the backfield.
Yeah, I really would like to say a tight end, like, you know, the way that we kind of talked about it. But it's just like I don't see the usage at all. Even now, like in practice, like those guys don't get first looks in the progressions or anything like that. I'm a big Jake Simpson guy, though, so I'll say Jake Simpson. But it'll probably be Connor Fox who gets the starting look.
All right, moving over to the defensive side of the ball. Dexter McCoyle Sr. was promoted to the defensive coordinator after serving as the safeties coach in 2023. He will share these duties with linebacker coach Bradley Dale Pavetto. Will they be sticking to the 4-2-5 defense that we saw in 2023, or are they going to change things up?
From everything we've seen, it looks like they're sticking with the same thing, and it worked last year. The number one thing Texas State wants to the one thing Texas State wants to do is get to the quarterback and then have good secondary coverage. And that's what they've kind of focused on when it comes to the transfer portal. That's what they focused on when it comes to recruiting. So I imagine that's probably what they're going to run again this year. Jacob?
I just want to say, too, like when we lost Jonathan Patke last year, it happened right after the First Responders Bowl. Like the Gatorade had not even dried on shirts out in the team room before ESPN announced that we were getting a new defensive coordinator this next year. And so that's kind of where this all came into motion. Coach Dex is awesome. The heartbeat really of that defense last year. So I would be surprised if we weren't really porting over what we did last year. And we got a bunch of the personnel to do it the same way too. And those guys learned from one of the best players in my mind from last year, Brian Holloway. That's my boy. Love that guy.
Yeah, I would say if you guys had an Achilles heel last year, I would say it was definitely probably the defense. Sometimes I think the quarterback play was. Well, I mean, when you give up 77 points to Arkansas State, that's not.
Hold on.
Hey. Wait a minute.
Let's push back here. When you're scoring 70 points, your defense is on the field more. So I don't know what you want to. If you're expecting the 2000 Baltimore Ravens back there, I don't know what to tell you.
No.
You're gonna get a lot more. You're gonna get a lot more snaps on defense. I understand that. Look, if you're gonna say Achilles heel. Stopping mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, there you go.
We all agree. But to say that the defense as a totality is an Achilles heel, I don't know if that's fair.
Maybe not Achilles heel is the right word, but I think if you have aspirations to winning the Sun Belt, the defense has got to be better than they were last year.
I think, and again, we're hinting at this. The aspirations are not only to win the Sun Belt, it's to get that 12th playoff spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the aspiration.
That's what Jordan McLeod told us too.
Yeah, well, and Jordan McLeod, God bless him, great politician, great quarterback. I don't know if he's paying attention to how the rankings work
of all time. No.
Well, let's talk about the guys up front along the defensive line. Overall, this group stayed pretty well intact. They will miss the presence of Jordan Revels, Sam Latham, and Chance Main, who all graduated, but they brought back their leading sack guy in Ben Bell. How did this unit look in the spring, and did anyone stand out to you guys?
Ben Bell looked bigger. I don't know how that's possible.
Ben Bell wasn't on the field the entire thing, but yeah, he looked huge.
He didn't play. He
That's
didn't
what I'm
play
saying.
The spring game.
Yeah,
but
he did get interviewed on the sideline several times. Yeah, it was like a whole production, mostly because this is my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Because of all the JDL stuff that happened, they made an entire production out of spring game. And so there wasn't a lot of questions to be asked, because we were getting the news straight from the players like, hey, what do you think about this and this and this and this and this? And then all the time, the ones and twos are running out there. So, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors, I think, in the spring game.
To answer your question, up front, we're going to be fine. I like Ben Bell. Brian Holloway was Jacob's guy last year. Ben Bell was mine. I thought the dude played insanely tough. He's one of those guys that if you're on the other side of the ball, you don't want to see that guy coming at you because he comes in like a missile. So I'm excited for up front. I think we're going to be okay. It sounds like we're just cutting Texas State propaganda. I swear we're not. I swear that we are level-headed people. I just think that last year's team was the first year of GJ Kenny, which means that is now the basement. That is as far down as they're going to go. That's a foundation. It only can get better from here. So I feel like last year's defense wasn't as bad as some are making it out to be, and then it's going to be better this year.
Well, your question, I guess, right now was mostly was it D-line stuff, or we talked about linebackers?
Just in general. I mean, I think, I don't think the defense was terrible or anything, but I just think to get where they want to get, there has to be improvements, I guess.
I think our secondary was probably the weakest, and it was mostly due to all the injuries that we had. I think on defense, Brian may have been the only captain left standing, or Brian, and then who else? Alonzo Edwards Jr.
Well, I'd like to point out Spears.
Oh yeah, Torrey was out for the entire year, pretty much.
Torrey was out for the majority of the year, the free safety, and he ends up being one of the most, I think, awarded, decorated players on Texas State's defense.
Still somehow, even though he missed 5 weeks or whatever.
I missed 5 weeks, so that's what I'm saying. The injuries, you can't really predict those because look, everything changes if of the 30 players we've mentioned on this podcast. If 15 of them are hurt, well, then Texas State probably doesn't go to a bowl game, right? You can't predict injuries. So if everything's equal, everybody's healthy, then this defense is supposed to be okay. Now, are they holding teams to under 30 points per game? Maybe not. But are they holding them under 40? For sure.
But that's where we get into the philosophy of this team. It's to score like more than 50 points a game, then you don't have to worry about defense is the entire thing.
When they came in, and again, I know we're pushing time. When they came in and they said we were going to try to score 50 points a game, Jacob, you can agree with me on this. I looked Jacob in the eye and said, that's insane. There's no way they're averaging 50 points per game. They got to 35. So I don't know if they get to 50 this year, but if they stick around the 35, 40 points per game, you're going to win a lot of games.
Our schedule is set up to do it mathematically too. Once you start getting to the conference play, obviously that's when you start trending down points wise because it's so defensively heavy. But we had a real-time tracker, I think, at one point. And they didn't get really close to it at all.
So you guys have mentioned a couple times so far about Brian Holloway. So you lose him in that linebacker group from last year. He's your leading tackler. But not only was he the leading tackler, he also, from a production standpoint, he also felt like a real leader on this defense. Has anyone kind of stepped up in the spring to kind of fill that role?
It's so hard because in the spring game, you're not trying to kill yourself, right? And Brian Holloway, if you took all of the leashes off of him, he's going after somebody. He's looking for blood. So to say is somebody going to replace this guy? I don't know. And I'm kind of happy that we don't know, because if we did know, that means people would have been hurt. We would have had an ambulance on the field. So I don't know who's going to step up in that linebacker role. I'd like to think somebody will. I like to think that somebody in that linebacker room will step up. If there is an Achilles heel, it might be the linebackers. You might be right.
I think if I'm covering this team the same way I would cover Capitol Hill, the people that the defense are sending out to talk on behalf of the entire position group is Caleb Culp. He's making some of the early season stuff and statements, and I think he was listed on Dave Campbell's top what is it, first team or something like that, or second team maybe. But yeah, he's one of those guys that they want out front and to get some early looks with the first group. For sure. You've
heard of the Minister of Defense. This is the Speaker of the Defense.
There you go.
James Neal is a pretty good linebacker too. You guys got him he came over from UTEP. He kind of played second fiddle, I guess, there with Tyrese Knight, but Neal was a pretty good linebacker in his own right. So he's someone I think can give you guys some production as well at that linebacker spot.
Yeah, I guess we haven't really been shouting out too many guys that have come down the transfer portal, but it's only because on our show we have a philosophy these guys aren't Bobcats until they're Bobcats, especially because who knows, we could get to the first week or even before then, I guess late summer transfers and stuff in fall camp.
Well,
that's what things you're interested in.
It's just so tough now too with the transfer portal, and especially at a school like Texas State, because look, NIL money be damned. You don't really know who's on your roster until it's set. You don't really know who's here until you know for sure they're on campus. Jacob, for the longest time, even before the transfer portal, would joke about the Bobcat commits. He's like, they're not really Bobcats until I see them in uniform.
Yeah.
It's really, the Twitter graphic's really cool, but
kind of a pioneer in that way, some would say.
Honestly, some are saying he's a Sacagawea of this whole transfer portal stuff. So I agree with him in this sense that I don't know if you're here to stay until you actually suit up. And it's tough because, again, if you take your fan hat off, you look at it from a journalistic standpoint, it's okay, yeah, these are young men. They have decisions to make. I get that. From a fan point, every one of these dudes who leaves, I wish them nothing but the best, but I wish that they weren't leaving. I'll tell you that much right now. I wish they would stick around Texas State.
The defensive backfield lost their second leading tackler, Sean Holton, and their other key piece, Caleb Ford Dement, both to graduation. Both are based on the returning guys, plus a few transfers. This group looks pretty solid. I mean, you kind of talked about maybe that was an Achilles heel last year. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It's still out there. No one knows. But it looks better this year on paper.
Some are saying it was the Achilles heel. Look, my point has been we couldn't stop mobile quarterbacks. If a quarterback could extend plays, Texas State could not stop him. Point blank period. That's how you end up with the Arkansas State game. That's how you end up with the Lafayette game or Louisiana
Coastal,
game.
Third string
That's
quarterback.
how you end up with Coastal. Every mobile quarterback, what hurt Texas State. And what helped in the Rice game is that they did not have a mobile quarterback. they had a pocket passing quarterback. And when Texas State faced quarterbacks that had a little bit limited to no pocket mobility, the defense could do what they had to do. So the secondary does get better. The transfer portal for sure helps, but I don't think that is like necessarily the problem. The problem is that the guys up front could not get enough pressure, could not contain, and you can only expect your corners and safeties to play coverage for so long.
Yeah, it's like a pipeline problem. Like the leak may be here, but actually the issues that led to it were in North Dakota, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't get pressure on a quarterback, you can have 6 Deion Sanders back there, and it doesn't really matter. Eventually, you know, someone's going to get open. That's just how it works, right?
We faced so many mobile quarterbacks last year, too, that people told us that TJ Finley looked like he was a mobile quarterback.
Which
how does that make sense?
I'm fighting this battle every day of my life. This is awful. Yes.
You mentioned Caleb Culp kind of getting a lot of those media time there. Do you think he's the guy that steps up into that Holton role?
I hope so. Yeah. He's a really cool dude. I think he really hadn't been getting like the limelight share until recently. Maybe we talked to him a couple times last year. But yeah, I think so. Maybe he is the guy that steps up because he certainly is acting like it right now.
If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season, who would that be?
I think it's going to be the MVP, Ben Bell. I think that Texas State has a legitimate shot here to have the offense and defensive MVP of the Sun Belt. And if there's a guy that's going to win, it's going to be Ben Bell because it's going to be probably around 7.5 to 10.5 sacks and probably in the neighborhood of 75 tackles. I think it's going to be. I'm picking Ben Bell, and then maybe that's the obvious answer. I know Jacob is probably like, what the hell's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, I mean, Christian Rory was like a huge signee for us last year out of Duke, and I feel like the production just wasn't there. So maybe this year they get it right. Bryce Bass, kind of the same thing. I don't know. Amapalesi Langi Jr. out of Hawaii, 310 pounds, 6'6". This guy's massive, and I'm obsessed with like height and weight because I'm very not a tall guy at all. So I really want to see some dude just pancake a dude every single time. We had Chance Main last year, and that was like seeing an NFL type dude every week. That was awesome.
And honestly, the one thing Jacob loves more than covering this team is going to cover them in the weight room as they lift weights.
Exactly.
He cannot get enough of the big dudes moving plates around.
I just think it's funny how sometimes sports writers have to watch dudes work out, you know? So I literally just tweet watching dudes work out.
With spring practice now over, which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning?
Ooh, most concerning. Linebacker?
I feel like our stock is like all the way up. Like it's never been more up. Like, you know, and we have all these Bobcat bonds that we bought of this team like in the 60s, it feels like. So now.
No, look, Jacob and I talk about the stock market of these sports teams all the time. We bought when it was like they were giving these shares away. This was like Enron.
We're Apple investors pretty much.
Nobody wanted to touch the Bobcats, and we were like, we're all in. And granted, we took some heavy losses early, right?
Massive.
But
lost my home. Lost my wife.
Finally starting to turn around. Yeah, Jacob literally lost loved ones to this team. So I am like feeling very good about myself.
So is there any particular position that the coaches are still looking to add? I mean, I'm sure the roster is pretty much well set.
Quarterback.
But, you know.
Yeah. I thought they were going to attack the O-line stuff a little bit more than they did. But I guess they added 4 dudes. Like, what am I talking about? But,
well, quarterback. Because if you could have 100 quarterbacks on the roster, they would do it. They are very much into all the quarterbacks. Now, again, Jacob and I have talked about this. We'll relay it here. It's all fun and games until there's an injury bug that hits one position group and you don't have anybody in that position, and all of a sudden RJ Martinez is out there playing strong safety. I'm just saying, at some point that's going to bite somebody. I'm just really hoping it's not us this season. You know, that's all. Having 5 quarterbacks on the roster is cool, but
GJ Kinney famously quoted as saying, "I like quarterbacks." So if there's one team that you could to expect to have like even more quarterback stuff is him. We have a 6'6" dude from like New Mexico State or wherever Carson Kaiser played last out of New Mexico. I mean, this is like guys that you never even heard of, pretty much, that are taking snaps with the second group, third group, fourth group, fifth group, and they all look the same.
What would you say is the main strength of this team heading into 2024?
hype, maybe. I don't know.
Friendship.
Togetherness. Last year, I think the biggest thing was like, can you guys do what you, and this is like what everybody was asking GJ Kinney, can you guys do what you guys did at UIW? And they would hold the mic, and like now they've kind of proven, like, not only can we do it, we can do it at an even better like clip, and we'll embarrass like Power 5 teams sometimes. We will absolutely demolish an HBCU, and like it was just kind of nuts to see, because I think before then, Zimmel, correct me if I'm wrong, we hadn't even seen you and I in person more than 2 wins a season. So
no.
To just see us winning on a consistent basis was insane.
Yeah, that is something that this team could not do 5 years ago, could not do 3 years ago. It was only to this season that they got above that 6-win threshold mark, right? Like that point where they can go be bowl eligible, and then to win their first bowl game. I think that is honestly the underrated biggest thing about this team is that they won a bowl game already. So that pressure is off of them. They went 8 wins last year. That pressure's off them. The only pressure they have now is, can you win the Sun Belt West? Can you win the Sun Belt? And can Texas State, and this is honestly kind of out of their control, it's going to be the rest of the Sun Belt that has to really help them out here. If the Sun Belt wins their non-conference games, their non-conference Power 5 games, and then Texas State wins the Sun Belt, then, and only then, can they sneak into the playoffs. That is the only way.
You forgot one key thing. App State's got to beat Liberty too. Because like
the best program
doesn't play anybody
G5.
else. So
yeah. I'm not all that concerned about the Liberty Flames. I'm not.
I'm sorry.
The point is that they play a weak schedule. They
actually
can go undefeated again, and we saw that played out last year.
I just don't think. I think that the voters. Granted, this is a lesson that I have been brutally taught multiple times. I hope that the voters are smarter than that. That a undefeated Liberty team.
I would hope so too, but I
should not get over, let's say, a 1-loss Sun Belt team. And that's not to say if Texas State doesn't win the Sun Belt, I hope that the Sun Belt champion does get to be in that 12th spot because it makes the rest of them look good.
Personally,
you don't.
No.
If it's not a Sun Belt West team, I really don't care. If it's like Coastal or JMU, whatever, right?
I mean, if it's Louisiana, I hope nothing good ever happens to them.
No.
So
or Troy or Southern Miss or South Alabama,
I hope
all those
bad
teams
things happen
fall
to
into the ocean. I wouldn't mind.
No.
So
I think
when it comes to
Zimmel, actually, I think realized consistency is probably the biggest strength of this team. And also, like, GJ has already alluded to this, but just like the massive differences between year 1 and 2 and like how that has affected his coaching staff and the way that he looks at stuff on the field. Like, obviously that's going to play a huge impact. This dude was like solo dolo coaching UIW through the FCS semifinal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then also trying to win recruiting battles, Texas State, with like a 1-person staff, which was him for like 2 weeks, I think. So I don't know how he did it and how he stayed alive. In the offseason last year, he told us he gained like 20 pounds or something just because of how many times he was going to the sushi bar for recruiting meetings with guys. It was nuts. Last year was a lot on a lot of fronts.
We follow him on Instagram. I'll tell you, he cut those 20 pounds. Looking pretty good with those LBs down.
So talking about recruitment, when it comes to recruitment of new players, retention of existing players, how has the NIL and the transfer portal impacted the Bobcats?
Well, we have a NIL expert that comes on the podcast, like once a week now, Jacob?
Who,
talks about
our fans or which one?
There's people who come on and talk to us about the money that Texas State has generated. 5 years ago, this did not exist. Texas State ran off all their boosters. They ran off all their fans.
You're talking about that. You're talking about that.
Yeah, I'm talking about that. Partially because the Texas State stunk, partly because the administration did not embrace money for whatever reason. Who knows? Now we are embracing money. We're trying to raise money. The NIL's there. And what nobody really understands or realizes is that once people come to Texas State, it's a lot nicer than most other Group of 5 schools. That's no shots. That's just a fact.
Some would say the nice too.
If you had a chance to come to sunny San Marcos or Mobile, Alabama, we're probably going to get a couple of South Alabama people. If you had a chance to go to sunny San Marcos or Hattiesburg, you're probably coming to San Marcos. So we're winning recruiting battles in the Sun Belt West. Huge. We're winning recruiting battles in the state of Texas because would you rather live in Waco or sunny San Marcos? Would you rather live in Lubbock or San Marcos? And also, you now have a little bit of a chump of change. And we're winning games. And we're putting up big numbers. So all of it plays a part, for sure.
and everybody wants to win, and that's like the biggest deciding factor because a lot of our guys, I mean, like we have, Texas, who's now an SEC team down the road. If our best guy goes to Texas, he's probably not going to start unless, Jordan McLeod, I don't know, whatever. But the point being, like, most of our guys would not start in the SEC, right? And that's the thing is, like, you could either not start in the SEC and ride the bench, or you could win with the Bobcats right now and, like, be in the Sun Belt, play competitive football, get looks from Power 5, or not just that, but like NFL scouts are coming to our stuff now too. That was never really a thing.
NFL
I saw like Hawaii Bowl
t-shirts.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like crazy big name bowl game people coming by, getting drunk with the Bobcats to try to get us looks other bowl games too. So,
well, I mean, and the fans are like crazy. Didn't you guys drink the stadium out of beer?
No,
not us personally. I wish.
I mean, the fans in general.
Yeah, I wish we were a part of that movement.
And this is a really hot take, and I understand that SMU's out of the group of 5, so we can badmouth them now. That stadium was not prepared. I don't know what they're doing at SMU, if they're sipping their
under
beer
construction, half of it.
We've went through that so quickly, and then they got all the beer from the basketball stadium, brought that over, drank all that. They had to
at
go
one
to
point
a
they brought an
Quickie Mart,
Anheuser-Busch
drank all
truck.
that.
People were just buying it out of the truck.
Look, I think part of it is Texas State's reputation of being a very excellent time school.
Shout out Southwest.
I think the other part of it is that SMU just wasn't prepared for the behemoth that is Texas State.
Yeah.
So, with the NIL, the transfer portal, the coaches have to recruit, freshmen, recruit their own current roster, recruit out of the portal. They have to do fundraising. They have all these things going on, in today's college football world. And it seems really the head coach is really more like a general manager per se. And maybe they're not as involved in the X's and O's. What are you seeing there with Coach Kenny at Texas State? Is he kind of doing it all? Does he have other staff kind of maybe helping him with some things, or?
Well, I forgot about this storyline up until last week when we had our boy Carter Yates on from DCTF. But he was telling us about how the Rice game, they didn't have headsets and stuff. And so GJ went up to the head official and was like, I don't need a headset. I don't need somebody in the booth to tell me what defense we're running. I know what defense they're running, we're running, everything like that. So he is a very football guy, quarterback guy. Even when you talk to him, I mean, if you're not talking to him about on the game, I mean, we've had him on our show too, and we joked around, talked about NCAA stuff. But if you get into the weeds with that guy, bring a knife or something because you will get into the weeds with him.
We had Chris Coots, the former SID of Texas State, on, and him and the head coach, you're talking media relations, you're talking about, hey, what stuff you have to do. And they get done talking 20, 30 minutes about what GJ did at Tulsa. What defense this other team's running. Hey, did you remember this play from 10, 15 years ago? So
he knows everything.
He is, and I would say this, like if you had to give like a grade scale across the board, I think the politics of head coaching would probably be the place where he had the most work to do. And from what we have seen over the past 365 days, he has done very well at getting those grades up in that department. He's kissed a bunch of babies, wrote a bunch of checks, shook a bunch of hands. So I think that he's doing everything the right way as a head coach. We were concerned. Well, I would say not we. Texas State fans were concerned. Jacob and I don't really care about GJ leaving. The question was like, is he going to win a bowl game and then jet? And it doesn't seem like he is. It seems like he's the type of guy that wants to really build something and then move on. Just like his mentor, Jeff Traylor at UTSA.
And according to the powers that be, or our fans who are all knowing, as we've already alluded to, or just boosters DMing us, like the biggest critique on GJ's resume is that he was kind of a one and done at UIW. If he came to Texas State and did the same thing, it'd be the same thing. So like, what message is he really sending? According to GJ, he wants to raise his family here. He loves San Marcos. He told us everything that every Texas State coach told us. I love San Marcos.
All right, so we've been talking about it all podcasts, alluding to it here and there. The dust has settled. 2024 is done. What does success look like for Texas State in 2024?
SBC title or die, dude. That's straight up where this team is headed.
I will be a little bit more conservative here. Jacob and I all year last year were a 6-6 podcast, Squarin Around 6-6 podcast. And then they win their bowl game, and we're like, this exceeded expectations. I will say a bowl win. I will not say Sun Belt Championship. An appearance would be sweet. A win would be even nicer. A college football playoff berth would be the best. But I'm saying a bowl win greater or equal to the First Responder Bowl. So the closer to New Year's Day, the better. Last year, we were playing on December 26th. If we're playing on December 28th, 29th, I'm not against it. I'm okay with an 8-win season, 9 wins with a bowl game. I would love that. I'm not saying win the Sun Belt. I think it's very doable. I think they should be a favorite to win the Sun Belt. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative. I'm saying greater or equal to the First Responder Bowl last year is where this team needs to be.
I just realized like what that means for my own vacation plans. And if we're playing for the SBC title, oh my God, I'm never going to go on vacation this year, basically.
You guys, I mean, Luke and I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or something, we kind of put our top five G5 programs or teams for 2024, and you guys were kind of my dark horse candidate.
All right, listen.
You're just saying that.
Let's do that.
You're making us blush.
I think you're. In my opinion, you're the favorite to win the Sun Belt West. So that's who if I'm picking who's going to win the Sun Belt West.
Oh God! And just wait till SBC Media Days when everybody's just like swarming GJ, like, oh, how did you? And all they're going to ask about is the playoff stuff. I know it.
Yeah. Instead of what we really care about, how are you going to incorporate the tight end?
Yeah.
All right. We talked a lot today about Texas State. Is there anything else you want to share or think we should know about this 2024 Texas State Bobcats football team?
If Texas State beats UTSA, we're done with them. We move on from that rivalry. We vanquished the Roadrunners. That is honestly, that's the only thing that Texas State can do this year to really put a cherry on top. If they beat UTSA, I don't care if we lose every game after that. I'm just so sick of the Roadrunners.
12 games in the regular season, and one of them matters, and it's that one. And I guess Louisiana, because we have never beat those guys either. And as we mentioned already, we hate them. So
I think the only thing that Texas State has beat Louisiana in recently is softball, and thank God for that, because the Cajuns are so annoying.
Yeah, and they're pretty good in the postseason
typically too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It helped that we hosted that, and there was like a torrential downpour, and there was a lot of things kind of working in our favor.
Sometimes God does have favorites. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Another
was it an actual downpour, or Jacob, were you just out there with a sprinkler?
I actually I was supposed to make that game, and the head coach told me not to go. And I was like, maybe I'll just kind of sneak by and stuff like that. Then my graduation weekend was that weekend, and I was up there to see my brother. And so I was with my family and ignoring everything in softball. And then the worst rain ever in San Marcos happens. There was like a tornado warning, actually, at one point. It was crazy.
Well, Jacob, Andrew, thank you again for sharing your time and knowledge with us today about Texas State.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Thanks for having us, guys.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.